The wind howled across the endless Persian plateau, brushing against the dry grass that danced like waves under a burning Sunday. In the distance, silhouettes of horsemen cut through the horizon, warriors draped in leather and bronze, their banners fluttering against the golden light of dusk. The air was heavy with dust and destiny. Narrator calm but powerful, no one could have imagined that amid these barren lands forgotten by gods and kings, a dream was taking shape. A dream that would one day rule the known world. At this time, the Middle East was a storm of chaos. Babylon, with its towering ziggurats and divine pride, ruled the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia. The kingdom of Media held the highlands to the north, its warriors fierce and ambitious. To the west, Lydia gleamed with gold, the birthplace of minted coins and mercenary power. Between these giants lay Persia, a scattering of tribes hardened by desert winds and united only by survival. But among them rose a man whose name would echo through eternity: Cyrus. Born around 600 BCE, Cyrus was not meant to be a conqueror. He was the son of a small tribal leader, raised in the silence of the mountains, taught to hunt, to ride, and to listen, not to the noise of men, but to the pulse of the earth. Those who knew him spoke of his eyes calm, unshaken, as if he already saw a future none could imagine. Narrator soft, reflective. They said he carried himself not like a man chasing power, but like one who had already made peace with it. When the Medes tightened their rule over Persia, demanding tribute and obedience, Cyrus refused. What began as whispers of rebellion soon became the heartbeat of a nation. Under a moonless night, he gathered the tribes, shepherds, blacksmiths, and warriors alike, and spoke words that would ignite history. Cyrus' firm, resonant voice: "We are not born to bow, we are born to rise. To forge our destiny not in chains, but in honor." The men roared in unity, and from that night the desert trembled with their march. The first clashes were small ambushes against Medes' patrols, lightning raids under the cover of sandstorms. Yet Cyrus fought not with cruelty but with calculation. When he captured cities, he spared the innocent. When he conquered enemies, he treated them with respect. His soldiers called him the king who forgives. Even his enemies began to speak his name with reluctant admiration. The Medes, once mighty, found themselves facing not a barbarian horde, but an organized visionary force, one that fought with discipline and purpose. After years of war, the Median king was overthrown. The banners of Media were lowered, and Persia, once a vassal, now stood at the center of a rising empire. Cyrus entered the Median capital not as a destroyer, but as a reformer. He restored their temples, protected their priests, and gave freedom to those who had been enslaved. In doing so, he did something revolutionary for his time. He conquered hearts, not just lands. Narrator with awe, he understood what few rulers ever would: that fear builds walls, but respect builds empires. As the tribes united under one banner, a new light began to spread across the map, from the Persian plateau to the edge of the known world. Trade routes reopened, cultures intertwined, and for the first time in centuries, peace followed conquest. The world began to whisper his name, not with fear but with reverence: Cyrus the Great. In the palace of Ecbatana, he stood upon the balcony, watching the sun dip behind the western hills. The wind carried the distant songs of his people, songs of freedom, unity, and hope. His general approached and asked, "My king, what do you see?" Cyrus smiled faintly. "Cyrus, softly, I see the beginning, not of my reign, but of our world." Narrator voice deepens. From a single man's vision rose a force that would reshape history. From the sands of Persia, he built the first empire that would touch every corner of the ancient world. The drums of destiny echoed once more across the desert. The torches of the Persian army blazed under the night sky, forming a sea of fire that stretched to the horizon. Narrator closing with grandeur. From a king born in the desert, the first stone was laid, the foundation of an empire that would rule the world. The music swells, deep percussion, ancient chants, and the whisper of wind as the scene fades to black. The dawn broke over the Persian horizon, where the golden sands shimmered beneath the armor of thousands. The drums of conquest thundered once more. From the heart of Persia, an army stretched farther than the eye could see, lines of horsemen, archers, and soldiers clad in bronze, their spears gleaming like a field of fire. Golden chariots rolled through the dust, their wheels carved with winged lions, symbols not of tyranny, but of destiny. Narrator steady, powerful. The dream that began in the desert was no longer a whisper. It was an army, and the world was about to hear its voice. Cyrus the Great now stood at the head of an empire in motion. His gaze was steady, his hand resting on the edge of his chariot as the banners of Persia rippled behind him. The campaign had begun first against Lydia, the land of riches and arrogance. Its king Croesus, famed for his wealth, believed no one could defeat him. But Cyrus was not driven by greed. He fought with strategy, striking swiftly, adapting to every obstacle, reading the battlefield like scripture. At Sardis, under the cold winter sky, Lydia fell. Croesus was captured. Yet when his fate hung between life and death, Cyrus ordered mercy. Cyrus, firm but calm, no king is made wiser by ashes. Let him live and learn what true power means. The court fell silent. Even the defeated king bowed his head, not in fear but in respect. Cyrus had done what no conqueror before him. Dared, he defeated an empire and gained a friend. From Lydia, his banners turned east toward Babylon, the jewel of Mesopotamia, where walls so high they kissed the clouds guarded a city of unimaginable splendor. Babylon had seen countless invaders fall before its gates. But when Cyrus arrived, he brought no fire, no siege machines. Instead, he studied the river that flowed beneath its walls, the Euphrates, and found its secret. Under the cover of night, while Babylon slept, his soldiers diverted the river's flow. As the water level dropped, they marched through the dry riverbed silent as shadows and entered the city without breaking a single gate. The people awoke not to fire but to the sound of Persian soldiers keeping order. No temples burned, no looting followed. Instead, proclamations were read aloud in every square, narrator gentle, reflective. By decree of Cyrus, all people shall be free to worship as they choose. No god shall be forbidden, no man shall be enslaved. The city stood still. And then from the priests of Babylon to the exiled nations within its walls came tears not of fear, but of gratitude. It was said in that moment Cyrus achieved something greater than conquest. He earned the world's trust. Narrator, warm, emotional. They said he conquered not with the sword, but with the human heart. From Babylon, the empire stretched even further east to the Indus Valley west toward the Mediterranean. Wherever the Persian banners reached, Cyrus built roads instead of ruins, bridges instead of prisons. He left local rulers in place, honored their customs, and wove together nations that once despised each other. The Cyrus cylinder, a clay tablet discovered centuries later, would bear the world's first declaration of human rights, proof that the man who could have ruled by fear chose instead to rule by faith in people. In the twilight of his reign, Cyrus often stood before his generals watching the sunset spill across the desert. His face, weathered by years of battle, held no arrogance, only calm understanding. One evening, his closest advisor Harpagus approached and said, "Harpagus quietly, you have given freedom to others, my king. But what will you claim for yourself?" Cyrus smiled faintly. "Cyrus, a world where men remember not my wars but my mercy." And for a time, it was so. His empire stretched across continents, the largest the world had ever seen. Yet fate spares no man, not even one touched by legend. During a campaign to the Far East against the nomadic Massageti, Cyrus rode into his final battle. The desert swallowed the army's whole chaos, dust and blood beneath the dying Sunday. When the dust cleared, the great king was gone. Narrator, somber, reverent, he who had united nations, who freed the enslaved and taught rulers mercy, fell not in defeat, but in destiny. The empire mourned not just a king, but a vision, a world where power served justice. His body was carried back to Pasargadae, where he was laid to rest in a simple stone tomb. No gold, no crown. Only an inscription that whispered his humanity, "O man, whoever you are, I am Cyrus who founded the Persian Empire. Do not envy me, but honor the earth that bore us both." Narrator, soft, reflective. And so ended the age of conquest, not with destruction, but with the birth of an idea that would outlive kings. The wind rises once more across Persia, carrying the echo of his name, Cyrus the Great, the ruler who turned conquest into compassion. Narrator, closing transition. After him there would be others, builders, dreamers, and the mad. But none would ever rule quite like the man who ruled with his heart. The drums fade into silence. The torches dim, and the world holds its breath, waiting for the next chapter of the Persian Empire. The empire mourned the passing of Cyrus, but his dream did not die with him. From the golden dust of Persia, a new figure emerged, one not born to rule, yet destined to shape the greatest empire the ancient world had ever known. Narrator steady, evocative. When vision fades, structure must rise. Where Cyrus dreamed, Darius would build. The scene opens under a blazing Sunday. The desert stretches endlessly, and in its heart stands Persepolis, a city that glows like a mirage. Tall columns pierce the sky, carved with lions, bulls, and winged guardians. The marble reflects the morning light, and the scent of incense drifts through the air. It is not just a city, it is a statement. A monument to order, intelligence, and permanence. From the high terraces, Darius surveys his creation. The son of a nobleman, not a king, he rose to power through wit and will. When the empire trembled after Cyrus's death, torn by rebellion and betrayal, Darius seized control not through brute force but through vision. He did not seek to expand, he sought to endure. Darius measured resolute empires built on conquest will fall to chaos, but an empire built on order will outlast time itself. He began to carve structure into the living body of Persia. The empire was vast, too vast for one man's rule. So he divided it into satrapies, provinces governed by local leaders, each accountable to him. It was a system of balance, autonomy, and loyalty intertwined. Taxes were collected fairly, roads maintained, armies supplied justice, administered. For the first time, a single empire stretched from Egypt to the Indus Valley, and it functioned like one living organism. Narrator with reverence, they said his empire breathed its heart in Persepolis, its veins, the roads, its mind, the king himself. Among his greatest achievements was the Royal Road, a highway spanning over 2,700 kilometers from the Aegean Sea to the mountains of Persia. Along its length stood rest stations, couriers, and guards, a network so efficient that messages could cross the empire in days. Narrator with awe, while others ruled through swords, Darius ruled through systems. It was not might but management that made him great. In the great hall of Persepolis, diplomats from dozens of nations gather: Greeks, Egyptians, Babylonians, Indians, each offering tribute and gifts. The air hums with languages from across the world. The throne room glows with torches reflected off gold and lapis lazuli. Musicians play slow, rhythmic melodies. Dancers move in patterns as precise as Darius's administration. Every motion, every word, every ritual designed to remind the world that Persia was not chaos, but cosmos order made visible. Greek envoy in awe. They call him King of Kings, not because he conquered all, but because all bow willingly. Darius listens, smiling faintly. He knows his reputation among the Greeks. Some call him tyrant, others call him god. But he seeks neither fear nor worship, only legacy. At night, when the fires burn low and the palace grows silent, Darius walks alone through the columns of Persepolis. His sandals echo against the stone. He pauses before a carving of Cyrus, the founder of the empire, and whispers softly, Darius reflective, "You built the dream. I gave it shape." Under his rule, art flourishes. Sculptors carve reliefs depicting unity, Persians and Medes, side-by-side subjects bringing gifts rather than chains. Craftsmen create patterns that seem to move under light. The empire's wealth funds not decadence but design. Narrator warm, inspired under Darius, Persia became not just stronger, but smarter. Not just feared, but admired. His reforms reach beyond borders, weights, and measures, standardized a common currency minted in gold and a universal legal code written to bind justice, not power. To the people of his empire, he is more than a ruler. He is an architect shaping civilization itself. But even as his creation reaches perfection, Darius knows that perfection is fragile. Beyond the Western Sea, whispers grow louder of restless city-states called Greece. They mock the King of Kings, defying his envoys, rejecting his order. Advisor, anxious, "My king, shall we strike them now, before their insolence spreads?" Darius turns to the horizon, his gaze unwavering, his tone cold but composed. "Darius, No storm ever destroyed the Sunday. Let them come. The drums begin again, slow, heavy, relentless, the sound of destiny returning. Narrator closing dramatic. And so, as the sun set behind the marble towers of Persepolis, the winds from the west began to stir. The King of Kings had built an empire of reason, but beyond the sea chaos was waking. Transition music swells, deep drums and horns echo through the desert. Narrator final line, prophetic. From the west the Greeks were coming. The drums of empire thundered once more. From the marble terraces of Persepolis to the stormy coasts of the Aegean, the world trembled beneath the might of Persia. Yet even the greatest empires must face the horizon they cannot conquer. Narrator, deep rhythmic, the King of Kings, had built a world of order. But from the west came chaos, proud, defiant, and free. The sound of waves, the crash of iron. Thermopylae. The narrow pass where mountains met the sea now echoed with the roar of battle. The sky hung heavy with smoke, and the salt of the ocean mixed with the smell of blood. Shields clashed like thunder, spears broke like lightning. On a hill overlooking the carnage stood Xerxes, the son of Darius, tall, fierce, wrapped in gold and crimson. The sun glinted off his crown as he watched his armies press against a wall of Greek shields. Narrator, steady, cinematic, he was heir to the greatest empire the world had ever seen, and he would not rest until the west bowed before the east. But the Greeks would not yield. At the head of the Spartan phalanx stood Leonidas, a king outnumbered but unbroken. From his chariot, Xerxes raised his arm, signaling another charge. Thousands rushed forward, waves of men colliding against the few. Yet again and again the Persians fell. Hours turned to days. Blood stained the stones red. Xerxes' fury burned hotter than the desert. Sunday Xerxes furious, echoing, "How can 300 men defy the will of 1,000 nations? Advisor hesitant, they fight not for land, my king, but for liberty." The words struck deeper than any blade. That night Xerxes sat alone in his tent, the muffled cries of the wounded filling the air. He stared into the flickering light of the oil lamps, the reflection of fire dancing in his eyes. Narrator soft, introspective. For the first time, the son of Darius felt the weight of his crown, not upon his head, but upon his soul. When dawn came, the Persians found another path, a mountain trail betrayed by a Greek defector. The next day, Leonidas fell, surrounded by the bodies of his men. Thermopylae was theirs, but victory tasted hollow. Narrator somber, the gates to Greece had opened, yet the heart of Persia began to tire. Months later, Xerxes' fleet stretched across the Aegean like a moving city, thousands of ships, their sails white as bone. The sea belonged to him, or so he believed. The Greeks lured him into Salamis, a narrow strait where the great Persian navy could not maneuver. As dawn broke, the wind turned and chaos erupted. Greek triremes rammed Persian hulls, splintering them to pieces. Fire spread across the water, black smoke rising into the heavens. From the cliffs, Xerxes watched as his navy burned. The wind whipped his robes. The sea, once his pride, had turned against him. Xerxes, low shaken. This is not how it was meant to be. His general approached, voice trembling. "General, my king, we must retreat. The men are lost. The gods favor them." For a long moment Xerxes said nothing. Then quietly, almost tenderly, he whispered, "Xerxes, then let the gods have their victory. I will keep my empire." He turned away, his face unreadable, part rage, part sorrow, part surrender. Behind him, the flames of Salamis reflected in his eyes like ghosts of ambition. Narrator reflective fading. He had come to conquer a people, but found himself conquered by the limits of power. When he returned to Persia, the world did not see the same man who had marched across the Hellespont. The grand procession was gone. The drums were silent. He had won battles, but lost belief. In Persepolis, the once celebrated king sat alone in the great hall, surrounded by silence. The marble still shone, but the light seemed colder now. Advisor softly, "The Greeks were not stronger, my king, only freer." Xerxes closed his eyes. For a moment he seemed old, not in years, but in spirit. He rose slowly and walked toward the balcony overlooking his empire, vast, glittering, eternal, or so he had thought. Xerxes' quiet resigned, no one rules the world forever. The music fades from the sounds of battle to the echo of wind through stone. Narrator gentle, poetic, and so ended the war that tested the heart of Persia. It was not defeat that changed the empire, but exhaustion. For power, no matter how great, always hungers, and hunger left unchecked consumes its own. The torchlight of Persepolis flickers, casting long shadows across the floor. The echoes of triumph and tragedy blend into silence. Narrator final line, low and resonant. The empire still stood, but its flame had dimmed, and from that fading light a new dawn was waiting to rise. The empire still stood, but its flame had dimmed. The winds that once carried the banners of Persia now whispered through empty halls. Marble walls cracked under the weight of time, and the sound of victory had turned into the echo of memory. Narrator low, solemn, all glory must one day bow before time. The scene opens on Persepolis, once a beacon of light in the desert, now burning beneath a foreign sky. Flames devour the carved reliefs of kings and warriors. The gold inlays melt into rivers of fire. The smoke rises high, turning the night crimson. At the heart of it all stands a young conqueror, Alexander of Macedonia, his armor glowing in the firelight. He walks through the palace that once belonged to Darius and Xerxes, his footsteps soft against the marble floor. The scent of smoke mixes with the faint aroma of incense still lingering from ancient ceremonies. Around him his generals shout and plunder, but Alexander's eyes remain distant, almost sorrowful. Narrator gentle, reflective. He had conquered Persia, but in the ashes he found not triumph, but awe. Alexander raised his torch toward the ceiling, watching shadows of ancient kings dance across the stone. Then slowly he lowered it. Alexander quietly, "No empire truly dies, it only changes hands." The flames continued to burn, yet in his gaze there was reverence, not hatred. Centuries of Persian dominance had finally yielded to decay. The cracks had begun long before the fire. After Xerxes, the kings who followed grew distant from their people. The courts of Persepolis became dens of intrigue and corruption. Governors, once loyal satraps, turned greedy, siphoning wealth for themselves. In the far provinces, rebellions flared like sparks in the wind. Egypt revolted. Babylon stirred. The mighty empire that had once connected 3 continents began to fracture from within. Narrator measured somber. It was not a sword that felled Persia, but the quiet rod of power, unguarded. And while Persia slept, a new power awoke in the West Macedonia, led by a man whose ambition knew no boundaries. Alexander studied the strategies of Cyrus and Darius, admired their wisdom and envied their reach. When he marched east, it was not hatred that drove him, it was fascination. He saw in Persia not an enemy, but a mirror. From the plains of Issus to the gates of Babylon, the two worlds collided, Greek intellect and Persian grandeur. Yet, as Alexander's armies advanced, they did not destroy, they absorbed. He kept Persian governors, wore Persian robes, and even married into Persian nobility. Narrator soft inspired. In conquest, he found kinship. In the ruins, he found a legacy. When he finally entered Persepolis, the city that symbolized the heart of the empire, he stood in silence before the throne of Darius III, now abandoned. His men expected celebration. But Alexander saw something greater, the reflection of a civilization that had once ruled with both power and mercy. Alexander softly, Cyrus built with wisdom. Darius ruled with reason. If I must conquer the world, let me do it as they did, through vision. He bowed his head before the Persian gods, not in worship, but in respect. Even after its fall, Persia's spirit refused to die. The ideas born from its golden age continued to ripple through time. From Rome to Byzantium, kings and emperors borrowed its order, its roads, its systems of taxation, its art of governance. The Ottoman sultans would later shape their courts in the image of Persian ceremony. And in the heart of the Middle East, the echoes of Persepolis remain carved into culture, language, and faith. Narrator warm, philosophical Persia's greatest conquest was not of land, but of mind. Its tolerance of religion, the belief that faith should never be forced, would inspire empires long after its stones had fallen. Its architecture with columns that reached for heaven and motifs of harmony between man and nature still shaped the skylines of modern Iran and beyond. Every arch, every dome, every road that links east and west carries a whisper of Persia, the empire that refused to vanish. In the final light of the story, the flames of Persepolis fade. The ruins stand silent under a purple sky. From the shadows, two statues rise, Cyrus and Darius carved from ancient stone, their faces calm and eternal. The last rays of sunset wash over them, bathing the desert in gold. Narrator: slow, emotional. They ruled not just with power but with wisdom. And though their empire has turned to dust, their vision still rules the world. The music swells, strings and deep percussion blending into a final crescendo. Narrator closing line reverent: for empires may burn, but ideas endure. And in every corner of civilization, the fire of Persia still burns quietly eternally. Fade to silence.